share and now you really this is what they're seeing when they're hearing us. You just need to forward it.
Got it.
If you escape, then you have to do this over.
Okay.
Sorry, everyone. That
So
took
sorry
a long
about the
time.
technical difficulties, and it looks, I think the presentation, some of the letters got a little bit squished, the transition from Windows to Mac, so bear with me. But my name is Faine Greenwood. I work for the Signal Project at the Harvard Humanitarian Initiative. I recently have started. I have a background in journalism, primarily working in developing countries. I'm a specialist in developing technologies and humanitarian aid, and I'm very interested in the use of drones for humanitarian work, journalism, and many other applications. What I want to talk about today is inexpensive drone mapping and some of the new technologies that have enabled it to become much more feasible for many more people. In the past 3 years, drones have gone from this very obscure technology that most people didn't know about, are associated primarily with the military, to something that you would buy for your kids for Christmas. It's something that people can build in their garage for $500 in hours. This is in large part due to inexpensive sensors developed for mobile phones. And now, of course, they're being used around the world, and they're becoming ever more popular as the years go by. Drone mapping. Drones have proven especially useful for mapping as a complement or substitute for aerial mapping and satellite imagery. So traditional aerial mapping techniques using an aircraft, a manned aircraft with a camera, or satellite imagery. The strengths of drones over some of these more traditional technologies include they're inexpensive. It's less than $1,000 or to buy some useful mapping platforms such as the Phantom 3 Professional. The ability to gather both still photos and video at both vertical and oblique angles. The ability to operate under cloud cover, or rather inclement weather conditions, and without a human being in the aircraft, which means there's less danger to the person who is taking the photos. And they're also modular. You can use a lot of different sensors, including LiDAR sensors, including infrared sensors, and so forth. And again, these capacities are expanding really quickly. Drone mapping in very simple terms. Basically, the drone has a camera or another sensor that shoots images as a small GPS unit, which lets it know where it is in space. Aerial maps are made from many images that are combined using photogrammetry software. And the pilot then either flies the drone themselves manually, or they use a program that flies it autonomously. There's a couple different varieties of UAVs, which means unmanned aerial vehicle, and it's an interchangeable term with drone. Multi-rotor drones, like the DJI Faine 3 Professional, which is what I own. They can be piloted autonomously. They're easy to learn how to use. In humanitarian context, they look less threatening than larger models, and they can be purchased or built very inexpensively. Newer models of both multi-rotor and fixed-wing drones will geotag each photograph they take. Fixed-wing drones resemble conventional airplanes. They're lightweight. They're often made from foam, wood, other lightweight materials. They have a much longer battery life than multi-rotor drones. They're often used for large mapping jobs, but they are considerably less maneuverable than multi-rotor drones. Some people build their own for as little as $500, while others buy off-the-shelf models, which can range anywhere from hundreds of thousands of dollars to $600. We made this drone model at the Medfield Mental Hospital outside of Boston. So this is a drone model that myself and my partner Dan made. We used the DJI Faine 3 Professional drone in drone deploy, photogrammetry, and processing software. The map in the 3D model spans 22 acres and used 172 photos. We flew 1,246 feet above the ground for all vertical images that we shot, and at differing heights for the oblique images. And now the cool thing about these 3D models is that they can be manipulated and flown through like a video game map. There with videos here. And we can use the same georeference photos to make an orthorectified and georeferenced 2D map using photogrammetry software. In this case, we achieved a ground sampling distance, detail level per pixel, of 3.2 centimeters, flying 246 feet above the ground. And you can see that this is superimposed on satellite imagery from OpenStreetMap. And that's one of the interesting abilities of this is that as an individual consumer level drone buyer, I can now superimpose my own imagery over satellite imagery. So the steps of drone mapping, I'll just go through a somewhat simple overview of what's required. The first step is flight planning, and software like Drone Deploy, this is the Drone Deploy user interface. It brings up satellite imagery, and then you basically drag around a vector over the area you wish to map, and then you edit your plan. So you can choose the altitude at which you want to fly. A higher altitude is often better for large mapping jobs. And then you choose the front lap and side lap, the degree to which the photographs overlap with one another, which allows photogrammetry software to process it. So in this case, you set up the mission. The software calculates the flight plan for you in a lawnmower pattern with the drone automatically shooting images. And you press a button and the drone automatically takes off, flies the mission, and comes back home and lands itself, because it has logged a GPS home point. A flight path resolution, some technical details. UAV flight paths have to have enough forward and lateral photographic overlap. This allows processing software to ID common points in each image. You used to have to do this yourself, and it was really problematic, but now the software does it for you. 60% overlap is a good bare minimum. 80% to 85% is something I shoot for. Resolution aerial photography is measured as ground sampling distance, length on the ground, corresponding side of 1 pixel in the image. The distance between pixel centers measured on the ground are, in simplest terms, the level of detail in each pixel. Again, you used to have to calculate this yourself, but the software will do this for you now. And here's the GSC equation, which is pixel size, height above ground level, focal length. And for this example, Canon S100 camera lens zoomed out has a focal length of 5.2 millimeters, 26 millimeters zoomed in. So if you wanted to resolve 1 centimeter size features on the ground with a zoomed out S100, we'd have to fly our drone at 1 centimeter times 5.2 millimeters divided by 0.0019 millimeters equals 27.3 meters equals 89.7 feet. And that's how high we'd have to fly it. Here's an illustration of this concept with showing the drone flying above terrain you wish to map, showing the altitude, the flight path, and the forward and side overlap. And the outputs you can get for mapping from UAVs include two-dimensional outputs, orthorectified georeference maps, which are generated by stitching together many still vertical aerial photographs. And you can also produce outputs that are three-dimensional, such as digital surface, DSM models, which are viewable in Autodesk and other applications. These are generated by photogrammetry software from lots and lots of vertical and oblique images from many different angles. And you can even conduct volume measurements now with today's UAV software. So common processing software, there's a lot out there, but these are some that I've used before. I just saw Photoscan as a desktop-based software. Pix4D is desktop-based. These are powerful photogrammetry software suites. Cloud-based software includes Drone Deploy. Drone Deploy is convenient because you can shoot all the images in the field using the flight planning software, and you can put them back into Drone Deploy's cloud-based system. They do all the processing on their own servers, and when you come back to the browser, you've then got your 3D output, your 2D output, and more, which is pretty convenient for field work. Open source, and there's also open source options, a little more difficult to use, but they are free. These desktop software especially are very expensive. So Visual SFM is one example, and a number of people have used that for UAV mapping. And a note on accuracy. In terms of the onboard GPS in my Phantom 3 drone, DJI, it's pretty good, but it's not survey level. It's good enough for some of the things that I'm interested in doing, humanitarian work, journalism et al. For survey grade accuracy, you're going to want to shoot ground control points. Measure with surveyor grade RTK GNSS receiver. And these align drone maps real world measurements. And this is a case where drones really make it a lot faster to do surveying work, because 10 ground control points are often enough to generate a geographically accurate UAV map. Whereas in the past, you might have taken over 1,000 points for similar accuracy in surveying. And some drone manufacturers like Trimble and SenseFly sell RTK GPS drones with the RTK GPS onboard the unit, and that streamlines this process and enables absolute accuracy down to 3 centimeters. But these are very expensive. Prices, again, will hopefully go down, but they're not cheap. There are lots of uses for drone mapping, some that I can think of off the top of my head, and there's many more. Archaeologists are using them, obviously. Miners are using them. Farmers are extremely interested in UAVs. Architects, construction planners find them very useful. Wildlife researchers have really embraced the technology, and many, many more. At my prior role at New America, a think tank in DC, we produced a database of UAV case studies involving nonprofit sector, but many examples. And this is all at drones.newamerica.org, and there's hundreds of examples to look at. Here's some case studies. And so in 2015, I traveled to Peru to write a case study on the work of Dr. Castillo, who's in the back of the room. He was he worked with the Peruvian Ministry of Culture to do a fascinating archaeological work using drone mapping, and the idea was to map as many archaeological sites as possible using UAV imagery in 2D and 3D to preserve them and document them. And it was funded by the Peruvian government, and it's, as far as I know, the largest such program in the world, and they've already mapped hundreds and hundreds of archaeological sites in often very adverse conditions and difficult field work. It's really very impressive. And they began from square one. They had no prior experience using UAVs, but really taught themselves. And they use a DJI octocopter and hexacopter UAVs equipped with cameras and Agile Photoscan Photogrammetry software to conduct this work. And here's some photos from my trip there. Here's some of the field team observing DJI octocopter. Here's an example of one of the UAV maps they've made. And another interesting case study I've been looking into, Jarlath O'Neill Dunn at the University of Vermont Spatial Analysis Lab has used the Sense-Fly EB fixed-wing drone to do small-scale disaster mapping. I find this particularly interesting because he is actually operating off a grant from the U.S. Department of Transportation. He has authorization from the FAA via Section 333 exemption to conduct this work legally, and he's particularly interested in using these tools for small communities. Small communities, when they have smaller disaster, are kind of in a bind. They often can't afford to hire a manned aircraft or task a satellite, whereas FEMA is not going to come out because the disaster is fairly small. So he's done some work, for example, a train derailment in Vermont in the fall. He deployed a drone and shot imagery of this. And he's also shot imagery of small flooding events in small towns of Vermont. And as someone interested in humanitarian aid, I find that idea of small communities using drones extremely interesting. And I do want to touch on some of the ethical standards involved with drones. That's something that we're really considering at Harvard Humanitarian Initiative. Field work with drones is fascinating and potentially very useful, but we also want to make sure it's done ethically and responsibly. And there's a number of concerns that have been raised about drones. I believe they're addressable, but they're worthy of study. These include privacy, data security, safety, adequate community involvement, and more. Some privacy issues that have been raised include: how do you protect the privacy of individuals that photograph from a drone or their property? Can we identify individuals from this imagery? And how does our drone imagery compare in resolution to imagery that's already available in Google Maps and other public services? If it's higher detail than that available online, that implies we have more responsibility to make sure that personal details are not identifiable. And how do we convey what we're doing to people we're photographing, and how can we use social media and other methods to convey the message of what we're doing so people don't get confused or by our actions? Data security is a big concern with UAV imagery and humanitarian work especially, including who do we share the data we collect with? What should we do about drone data that could be used to harm innocent parties? How do we make sure we collaborate with people who share our values? What will we do if our drone detects illegal activity or other unintended data? Which is something that has already happened and really needs to be addressed. And safety includes: how do we ensure we fly safely? How do we mandate pilots are competent, well-trained, know what they're doing? What do we do if a drone crashes? What do we do if it harms somebody? What kind of insurance should we be carrying? Community involvement is also, I think, key if you're looking at doing UAV mapping work in developing countries, humanitarian contexts, which includes informing communities. You don't want to just appear with the drone, start mapping, and never explain what you're doing or why. How do you convey what you're doing to people across cultures and languages? And how do you work with communities to ensure the data we're gathering is data they can use, not just data that we're collecting without sharing with them in a way that they find useful? And are we flying the drone because we want to, or because we believe that the drone people in this community will actually benefit from the data we gather? And finally, this has obviously been a pretty surface level analysis, but if you're interested in more detail, in July 2015, I co-authored a primer to civilian UAVs. I was working at New America in DC with Konstantin Kakayas. And you can read the whole thing for free at drones.newamerica.org. The entire 150-word primer is available online in PDF. In chapter breakdown, it has a lot of detail on how this works and some of the regulatory, ethical, and technical concerns and considerations with using UAVs for mapping for other projects. And I'd like to touch on what I'm doing now for the Signal program at HHI. We're going to be incorporating drone technology into Signal's existing humanitarian work with satellites. And we intend to release a quantity of new research in remote sensing, including UAV technology, for humanitarian purposes, and we're going to release research in areas including ethics, practical applications, tool-to-task match guidance, and other projects. And we believe this will really be a lot of the first such research in the world on these topics, so we're pretty excited about it. And secondly, if you're interested in remote sensing using both satellites and UAVs, in June, the week of June 20th, we will be holding a workshop in remote sensing at HHI here at Harvard. And it's going to be a five-day workshop focused on humanitarian managers, but open to all. And we'll be giving a fairly comprehensive overview of these issues, some of the newest research and some of methods for managing this data and using it ethically. And finally, I'm always available to talk about drones and drone mapping. I'd be happy to talk with you, steer you to others, provide resources that I have. You're welcome to get in touch with me at fainegreenwood@gmail.com. And and of course, see me after the talk if you'd like more information or to get more contact info for me. I think that's everything for the slideshow, but I'd be very interested in taking questions at this point. Yeah. Yes.
From your perspective, what's the current status of the new regulations so that we comply legally without these exemptions?
The regulatory environment is pretty complex. It differs greatly around the world. Every country, and actually,
I'm thinking of the U.S.
Yeah, in terms of the U.S., so right now, in the U.S., we are really just awaiting final regulations from the FAA, Federal Aviation Administration. As it stands, the only way to do commercial work, which is a pretty broad definition, essentially anything you receive money for.
Or my TRR.
Correct. Right now, the only way to do that is to get a Section 333 exemption, which is a pretty lengthy process. The main hang-up for most people is that it requires someone with a manned pilot's license has to be present in operating the drone. That's been a large barrier for a lot of people because that's a pricey process. However, it looks like we are all hoping in the drone community that in 2016, final regulations will come out, will permit commercial operations for UAVs under 55 pounds. Operators will simply have to pass a written test online instead of getting a manned air pilot's license. But we don't really have an exact timetable on that, but hopefully this year. So I'm hoping that it's resolved so people can begin using these without having to go through this legal process.
Sure.
Yeah.
We're in the midst of that at MIT.
Yeah, so I've heard. I'm actually very curious to hear more about that. Anyone else? Yes.
Does the drone community have any collaboration in data sharing? Any organized effort in sharing images out?
Yes, there's a number of projects focused on that. Some people from the OpenStreetMap, OSM, OpenStreetMap have been involved with a couple of projects that are dedicated Open Drone Map is one, and Open Aerial Map is another. And yeah, these are nascent but developing projects devoted to sharing UAV imagery, especially for disaster situations, but other projects are possible as well. Yes?
I have a number of questions. First is, this lack of regulation here in the U.S. Has a ripple effect all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
Because the FAA is actually considered to be like the standard, world standard for regulation of more civil aviation. And thus, it's affecting us all over. There's a different standard that is, it's referred in the literature in many ways, but the Australian standard of setting self-regulation in items, like don't fly at above certain height, and do not fly at night, and always fly on a line of sight, etc. Seems to be also working. But have you thought of the implications of the lack of regulation and the lagging of the regulation? Because I think that this is one of the most concerning things. You see, because of the lack of regulation in the U.S., if you want to use drones not only here, but in most parts of the world, even for a humanitarian purpose, you might be falling into an illegal operation. As you probably know, one of those examples was the earthquake that happened in Nepal last year, where drones were one of the most useful technologies. The terrain there looks very much like Peru. Very narrow valleys where earthquakes produce immediate landslides that actually block all the highways. So getting to any point, even if you want to rescue people, it's almost impossible. You cannot fly helicopters, you cannot fly airplanes. And thus, drones ended up being probably the most useful tool in hand. But flying them is illegal. Flying them is illegal. Then that's one side. Then there are technical things. If you have flown on fixed-wing drones, airplanes basically, the capping of the height at I don't know what is here, 400 feet or so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's 400.
It's ridiculous. These things fly at 700 meters over sea level with no problem, no issues. And actually, in my country, it's ridiculous because at 400 feet there are mountains, so you're going to crush whatever you do.
Yep.
So in order to survey, for instance, for the kind of stuff we were doing, looking for sites, protecting sites, developing strategies to protect sites from poaching, looting, squatting, the cap at the 400 feet it's senseless in the sense that it's like something set in Washington D.C. where there are no mountains around, and of course 400 feet will keep you covered from everything.
You can't fly in DC anyway. So.
But you see, this is the same standard is going to be applied in Nepal, where 400 feet over sea level is probably nothing because all the countries are all like.
I'm assuming they'll calculate AGL, but yeah, there definitely is a concern that the U.S. has really dragged its feet in regulations behind a lot of other countries. Many other France has advanced regulations, the U.K. has regulations, Australia, many countries are developing regulations. And I've actually got an article coming out in a Drone 360 magazine about the implications of the implications of slow movement regulations on humanitarian work, because I do believe it is a problem. It is kind of impacting innovation and experimentation, because it really has been a struggle to get permission to use UAVs in the U.S. in many of these contexts. No, that's a really legitimate concern, and I'm really hoping this resolved in 2016. That'll open the door to a lot of great work here in the United States. There's a lot of great work being done in other countries that have less restrictive regulations. And per your point, I do believe that whatever the U.S. decides to do, many other nations, and many nations don't have any formal rulemaking on UAVs yet, will probably follow our lead. So it's really important to get this right as much as we possibly can. Actually, one thing I did want to show everyone, because I was able to get this set up on my computer. This is Drone Deploy. This is the Drone Deploy user interface. And it's the cloud-based processing tool. And this is a map that I made about 2 days ago. I flew over my old high school in Sacramento with my Phantom 3 drone. So this is the result of 3 flights. So it's 267 images covering 50 acres. It's the result of 3 flights. I did 2 flights. I conducted 2 flights using the automated system, so flying a lawnmower pattern and over the same area, and one had a much higher overlap than the other. I just wanted to experiment and see what would happen. The second one I flew manually, so I flew it myself, and this one I flew with the camera at an angle to shoot oblique imagery to develop a 3D model. And yeah, right now, so Drone Deploy does not support oblique imagery and the autonomous tool, and also most people seem to fly their oblique imagery manually. It's a good idea to fly circles at 2 different altitudes to get the maximum amount of angles. So this is the 2D model. This is the orthomosaic, and it's georeferenced using the onboard GPS of my drone. And yeah, this is the results. So you can see the school farm. Me and my teacher are standing right there. I could have achieved a higher GSC on this if I'd flown lower, but it's pretty darn good. So you can make out our shadows. You can make out the box the drone came in at this level. And this is my drone that I paid $1,200 for. So this is definitely not exactly a expensive technology. They sell them on Amazon. Now, the cool part to me, this one of the Mosaic is pretty interesting, but the cool part to me is definitely the 3D models. And this will fire up. So again, nice thing about drone deploys is all done in the browser. This is actually an Autodesk. And you can share these models in Autodesk, and people can access them, interact with them in their own browsers, which I found very interesting. So it's loading, which takes a minute. Yep. Here it goes. So yeah, this is the 3D model I produced. It took about I'd say on drone deploys processors, it took about 7 hours to get final results back in my email. And again, these were delivered to my inbox. I can access them from anywhere, which is nice. I don't have to have this on my computer. Yeah, this is the 3D model we produced. The trees need a little work. I could do some post-editing and a little more, probably more flights to get a better result. But for the amount of time I'd spend it, which is roughly half an hour of flight time between the 3 flights, I'm pretty content with it. So yeah, as you can really see the depths here. Actually, Drone Deploy, for example, has a volume measurement feature that apparently works quite well. They released a few weeks ago. And again, this would also be even more geographically accurate if I had taken ground control points, but I don't have an RTK GPS receiver lying around, so I didn't. Yeah, these 3D models interest me because they are relatively new to the humanitarian sector, I think to the mapping sector, and I'm really curious to find out what people will end up doing with them. What their application will be, from volume measurements to storytelling to urban planning. I think there's a lot of really interesting implications. So this is one. Also, we go back to the Ortho Mosaic, a few other drone deploy features. This is the projections. This shows each projection of the images I took. And you can also, in drone deploy, you can also do annotations. So you can place markers at different GPS points to so you can write down different data and locations on your map. And you can also you can draw lines. A number of interesting features you can use with drone deploy.
Note that those lines, when it'll measure area and length as well.
And again, the new feature will also measure volume. So actually, how it works, once you fly your drone, in terms of the flight planning process I showed everyone, then you go back, so Drone Deploy communicates with your drone, it fires up a new project, you can name it, and you upload all the images into Drone Deploy and begins processing them anywhere from 2 to 7 hours. Yeah.
Yeah, because I have curiosity about when you do the planning.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you manage the wind? Or maybe it's not a problem, but I just curious.
Yeah. So the
Repeat the question. Yeah. So the question is about when you do your planning, how do you manage the wind? It might be there or maybe not, or maybe it's not a problem, maybe it is. If you can talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I have successfully used the Phantom 3 in reasonably windy conditions. I would say anything from 11 miles per hour has worked. I would not. The Phantom supposedly is rated at 15 miles per hour and not fly anything higher than that. The camera is mounted on a gimbal and is able to compensate quite a bit for wind. And the UAV itself, because of it has a lot of sensors and stabilization features. They stay remarkably steady. You can actually one thing I like showing people when I'm hovering mine is you can kind of slap it in the return position because of the internal GPS. Yeah. But actually, Dr. Castillo, what windy conditions, how much wind are you comfortable with using? Because I know you have that a lot in Peru.
When it's very windy, we don't fly.
Yeah. Yeah, whenever I go out to fly, I will definitely check the weather forecasts, and basically if it's above 12 miles per hour, I don't bother. But, so that is definitely a constraint. Yeah.
That's much better.
Having flown the Phantom 3 and actually done some mapping in fairly windy conditions, so the major thing that you have to account for is that the battery may not last nearly as long as you expect, just because it's going to be using extra power to maintain its position.
Definitely.
And then in the case of, say, Drone Deploy, you may want to do some extra overlap on your imagery, because I have noticed a tendency for, if it does get blown off course, it'll arc around to the waypoint instead of going in a straight line or trying to correct itself.
Yeah, that's one going concern with actually. So actually, here's the flight planning process. The other nice thing about Drone Deploy, you can actually plan your flights in the browser. Yeah, so you can actually use the software. You can use it offline. So you can use Drone Deploy to it works with your mobile network, and you can do your flight planning in the field off your phone if you'd like to, which I often do. But if don't have mobile access where you're going, you can do it offline. So then the way this works is when you're planning your flight, yeah, you simply click create a vector area. So it tells you how many acres you want to be mapping. So I finished drawing. This is Harvard Square as an example. Finish. So then it automatically calculates the lawnmower pattern. So 268 feet, I can tweak the altitude if I need to. 93 acres. It'll be a 19-minute flight. The wind estimate is 13 miles per hour because it knows where we are. It's estimated terrain elevation. And you go into in the advanced feature, you can also change the altitude up or down, depending. Do you want to cover more area? Do you want more detail? You can also tweak the front lap and side lap, which means that, so if I tweak the front lap to 85. That recalculates the lines, basically the tracks be closer together, and which means the images will overlap more, but also means that it'll take a lot longer. For example, the flight now will take 48 minutes. Of course, the drone's battery is going to last roughly, in Phantom 3, I try to bring it back. It's rated 25 minutes. I don't fly it that long. I bring it back at 20 minutes. And it seems that I've come through with that. This would take 48 minutes. However, what this means simply is the drone will just come back, land itself at its start point, and you swap out the batteries, put them back in, it goes and continues its mission. So that means 48 minutes, it's not the end of the world. And one advice I do have is always buy lots and lots and lots of batteries. Though again, that's one benefit of fixed-wing UAVs. Yep.
So Faine, I think there's clearly a lot of interest in drones and how they can be used in many different ways. And beyond this talk, where a lot of people are getting a lot of great information, is there a community locally, or is there some idea of a synergy between MIT and Harvard and other users who can start bringing people into this new technology and sharing information like today? Is there anything going on, or do you think there's worth setting something up?
Yeah, I would love to set something up like that. There are some drone communities based in the Boston area. Many of them are focused on racing drones, which is a whole other, also fascinating but completely separate from what we're talking about. Yes, I personally would love to set up some kind of club or meetup or something that it focuses on UAVs and between Harvard and MIT, because I'd love to have both communities sharing information and expertise. And of course, at Signal, we're also going to be developing a lot of new drone-focused research, and we're very interested in sharing that with others and collaborations, whatever people are interested in. So I'd love to hear people's ideas, and I would definitely love to help set something like that up. Yes.
At the moment, do drones sense each other? Do they communicate? I mean, that might not be a problem yet. There aren't too many people flying above Harvard Square, but
there's a number of drones are not good at sense and avoid. If you've ever seen those videos, those really cool looking drones that follow you and take pictures of you doing extreme sports, not really. That's not actually, they don't actually work that well because they don't know where trees are. So you're doing your cool snowboarding trick down a hill, there's a tree, drone smashes into it. Not so great. So sense and avoid technology is being improved, but it's really not there yet. Actually, MIT, there's been some great research at MIT on that, so hopefully that'll be getting better and better. And secondly, there are some efforts to conduct air traffic control with drones. Again, it's not really there yet. And that's a major barrier to delivery drones, like the Amazon model, because they don't know where each other are, then they're not going to work so great. So that's people are working on this answer. Yes.
One question, maybe somebody in the audience. In the Peruvian program, we have flown like 1,000 missions. We have recorded like 1,000 sites now, and we have crashed every single drone we have.
I saw one of them.
I have crashed every single drone, and I've been flying for a while. And the problem is basically, it's not the trace, it's the electromagnetic spectrum that you don't see.
Mm-hmm.
You don't see it simply. I mean, you are not aware of the fact that there's an antenna that is emitting a frequency. You don't know if the high tension tower is.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, I think, one of the most dangerous things in terms of security in drones, because you don't know what you're. I mean, you're measuring height and wind and stuff, but you are not measuring the most dangerous things, because I mean, when your GPS simply shuts down, or you lose contact between the drone and your remote control, that is based on a very weak signal, even if you bump it, I mean, it's going to be weak nevertheless. I mean, that's when the drone, I mean, becomes a bullet, because it starts flying fast and hits whatever it has to hit, or ends up somewhere else. So I've never seen anybody concerned about that, of making the electromagnetic spectrum, I don't know if visible in a way, but allow you to measure that there might be some disturbance around you that actually will provoke your loss of signal, or a perturbance of some way. So this is a question that is more technical, of course, but I guess that 2/3 of all the crashes we have had are due not to battery loss or human control, but basically the fact that you encounter unannounced electromagnetic disturbance.
Yeah, flyaways are definitely a problem. I mean, there have been some improvements in technology. That's not my area of expertise, but yeah, I definitely would be interested in having the same question answered by someone who is an expert in that area. Yes.
Just thinking about loss of drone control, flying in an area like this, are we ready to do that?
Right. That's definitely a question. Is flying in areas that are urban. Again, I would say I feel pretty confident in the Phantom 3. I personally haven't had any flyaway GPS problems, but they definitely do exist. Yeah, that's definitely a going concern. Is what are safe areas to fly in? What's safer than other situations? I know right now I definitely encourage people to avoid flying over big events. I mean, I do think it's pretty safe for a trained pilot using a UAV to fly near events. But yeah, flying over large groups, there are problems for amateur pilots or people who are just human error, flying over an event and crash it. So that doesn't be moderated. I think it's possible. People need to be careful.
That's happened in the backyard where someone was suspiciously flying over our house and annoying us. We see them stop over our house, and then the next day we saw it crashing during the yard.
Yeah.
They didn't have a line of sight.
No.
I think building on that for humanitarian purposes, if you're using drones in the field, it may become a real issue. One of the things the U.S. Army is learning is that the Russians are very good at jamming GPS. And it's from the Ukraine, the war in the Crimea, and so they're making U.S. soldiers learn to use compasses and maps again. You can't do that. You can't have a map and a compass on board a drone. A paper map. So you may that's something to consider in the context that there may be people out there deliberately trying to jam your drone. If say you're in a conflict zone trying to do mapping and humanitarian side, a crisis.
Yeah, there's counter drone ops out there, and then we'll need counter drone ops. That's just the way of things. Yeah.
Have you ever seen anything that looks like a drone blimp? That is a slow-moving drone that really wouldn't hurt anybody if it fell, and it would just putter along quite steadily. Does that even work?
I mean, actually, there's been a lot of interesting work's been done for years now with the weather balloons, cameras on them. The main problem there is that they do get buffeted around by the wind a lot. That's the main problem, is that they really don't have much resistance to wind. But yeah, no, there's still been some great mapping work done by, using blimps. That's definitely.
Does that get around some of the regulatory? Are those considered different types of systems?
As I understand it, if it's tethered, if it's attached to a string, which obviously a balloon usually would be, then it's fine.
Then it's a balloon.
Right. So that's actually one reason some drone manufacturers, such as Helen Greiner's company, here have been experimenting with sci-fi works. SciFi Works have been experimenting with tethered drones because it gets beyond some of the regulatory issues are resolved that way. Of course, you can also operate a drone in a net. That's another loophole people have been exploiting is get a really big net. If you want to do experimentation, because I'm friends with a lot of drone racers, and they are really good at setting up and putting down nets because that's how they often legally operate in areas that are too close to airports or other areas where they might not be allowed to work. So, yes.
So I work for the city, so I've like been trying to say, how could I get a drone up here? And it's been, you know, not warmly embraced by some of the departments here for a number of reasons. One, you know, and I've talked to some folks that do have the license to do it in the North Point area, which is up by the Museum of Science. But it's too close to the airport. It has to be a certain distance to the airport. It's too close to the highway. I was hoping to try to get something up so I could create some obliques, so I could do some facades on a 3D model. And so it's a bit of a, I don't know when I can do it. Maybe over the Fresh Pond Reservation or something would be the one likely spot I could test something. But
actually, get in touch with me because that's actually very interesting. Yeah, I'd love to talk to you about that. Actually, per your question, so Public Lab, trying to remember the name, Public Lab has done some fascinating work with balloon and kite mapping. So
Jeff Warren.
Yeah.
Public labs.
So they actually Public Lab said they know a lot about this stuff. They developed a low-cost photo stitching technique, and I think they're pretty cool. Anybody else? Yes.
So my research group recently purchased a drone, and we're trying to measure air pollution around the Boston Cambridge area. And we got in touch with Harvard Risk Management and Audit Services.
Yes.
And I was just wondering if you've known other groups who've had to face the same hurdles. They know that we have to get drone insurance, and we have to get an institutional 330-degree exemption. Just working with them. So is that usual sort of avenue?
Right now, unfortunately, universities have to be especially careful. Actually, we're going through this right now at Signal Project as well.
We are, with all caveats, we are beginning the process of going through the hoops to try to build the first 3D drone model of the Harvard campus this spring. So all caveats, we're not there yet. But if there's any experience you have, if we could coordinate, so we're not doing that.
We should compare notes. That would be great. But unfortunately, that is kind of the way of things. Again, the hope is that the FAA will kind of resolve a lot of this. Will be resolved legally this year, and that'll make life a lot easier for people who want to use small drones to do this kind of operation. So cross fingers that we don't have to go through this much longer. But right now, it is kind of, especially for large, high-profile institutions, you really do have to jump through those hoops, unfortunately.
I think the new regulations are really quite recent.
They really are. I'm waiting. They're not implemented yet, but the way they're written, I really don't have a problem with them. One recent introduction, which was a surprise to all of us, was drone registration. So right now, everybody who owns a drone, an individual user has to register with the FAA. It costs $5. It's not. It costs $5. I don't think it's a huge constraint. And it's kind of a nod to public safety. I'm not sure how effective it's going to be because it's quite hard to identify. Usually when a drone crashes, it's often either destroyed or it's, I'm not sure how effective it'll be, but it's a start. Yes.
So back to the previous question, in the case of sort of two projects that are looking at the same geographic area, I'm thinking sort of larger scale, and in the future, how much sense do you think it makes to not only share data, but actually to share equipment or to have common drones that are used for a bunch of different purposes, be they commercial or humanitarian or whatever it is, sort of like a drone sharing program?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. That at the price point a lot of drones are at these days, it almost is.
I'm not looking at it so much from that standpoint, but from someone asked about Harvard Square having all these drones going around. At some point, does it make sense, even if it's not from a price point, but from a regulatory point, or from a public safety point, or even just for an efficiency point, to share the actual equipment?
Yeah, I think that would be interesting. I know a number of institutions are thinking about forming drone libraries. I think that's something a lot of people have been talking about. Academic institutions, companies. I mean, I'd be interested to see what happens going forward with that and how that. I'm interested to see how that lines up with, I guess, insurance and operator responsibility. Because I think there might be a problem with having, like, for example, the university owns a drone. I would imagine the operator would have to at least pass the written test the FAA has proposed to operate it legally. But again, that's a lot less of a barrier than getting a manned pilot's license.
Sure.
So.
The model that we're considering, at least I work in
Yeah.
IT libraries, is that we will have a drone, we'll have a pilot, and we will go out and work with you on the survey.
Got it.
Develop the survey, and we'll help you implement it, and you come back and use the software to process it.
Right.
But not letting somebody borrow it, like we let people borrow GPS units.
So the you in that model is essentially anyone at MIT that needs a drone for any project?
Yeah, that's the goal. I mean, obviously, if everyone needed a drone next week, or the week after it becomes legal, it wouldn't happen. But if everyone really did need it, then perhaps it would be a bigger program than what I envision. Money for it because.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, the idea of restricting who I'm gonna, because I put my name out there as well. Make sure that's taken care of.
Right. Yeah. There's definitely going to be some. I mean, again, insurance companies really starting to get on the ball with drones. So I think that's DJI has actually started offering a drone insurance policy for individual drone owners, and yeah, the insurance companies are thinking about it, which is good to know. Anybody else? Cool.
So I guess we can thank Faine and wrap up here. Thanks all. You want to put your email up in case?
Yeah, so I'll go back to the last slide. Oh, it's this one. Yeah, it's Faine Greenwood, Faine, Greenwood @gmail.com, and I'm easy to find. I'm also my website's faineg.com, so
Great.
Easy to find me.
Thanks very much.
No problem.
Let me turn on this thing.
So, Faine, can you recommend that film?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, so